Greetings, my name is Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin,
and we are the Dungeon Dudes. Welcome to our 2024 Wizard Class Guide for Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition.
We'll be taking an in-depth look at all of this class's features, ability scores, spells, subclasses, and build options to help you build a wizard for your next D&D campaign. There's a lot to discuss, so let's get rolling.
Our Wizard Class Guide is sponsored by Unnatural Horrors. This 250-page tome packed with stunning illustrations contains everything that you need to run a horror adventure for Dungeons & Dragons.
It's going to be compatible with both the 2014 and the 2024 rules, and the book features magic items, monsters, and much more, including the best-selling horror adventure Domain of the Nameless God. It's also complete with a nightmarish campaign setting, Cromana, the Realm of Nightmares.
Now, if your idea of wizards involves stirring the dead, then you might also be interested in the true necromancer class in this book, which lets you play as a necromancer or incorporate necromancers into your stories with new spells, abilities, magic items, and best of all, lots of new horrific monsters that your necromancer can call to unlife.
Monty and I are huge fans of horror, and we love finding new ways to scare our players, so this project is perfect for us. You can make sure to follow the links in the description below if you want to get in on this campaign while it's live on Kickstarter. And now, onto this week's episode.
Magic infuses the worlds of Dungeons & Dragons, and perhaps no class better symbolizes and represents the power of the arcane in the worlds of D&D than the wizard.
The wizard is a full spellcaster, and a lot of what makes the wizard special is the vast array of spells that they have access to. We are going to be talking about all of the class features you get, but a large portion of this video will be focused on the spell selection that you're going to take to really define what type of wizard it is that you're playing.
Wizards combine careful study, planning, intellect with arcane magic, and there are so many different ways that you can play a wizard in your D&D games, but there's a lot of really iconic archetypes as well that sort of rise to the front when we think of what the classic wizards are. And I'm not just talking about the gray-robed, long-bearded, staff-wielding, big hat wearing wizard, but in terms of the way they use their spells and magic.
Long pointy hat, big bushy beard. Yeah. One of the first archetypes to look at is the Blaster Wizard, which unleashes arcane destruction upon their foes using powerful damage-dealing spells. A blaster is going to focus a lot more on the damage-dealing magic and how to manipulate and alter those.
Alternatively, you might be drawn towards the Controller archetype, much like myself, and prefer selecting spells that allow you to incapacitate your foes and reshape the battlefield using very powerful conjuration or even illusion, divination, a huge range of spells to really take control.
Or you might play the Supporter, which augments and protects their allies with abjuration and transmutation magic. Wizards can also be illusionists, necromancers, summoners, and regardless of their specialization, all possess incredible utility, and they can adjust their role and play style by choosing the right spells.
However, these archetypes, the Blaster, the Controller, and the Supporter, are great places to start if you're playing a wizard for the first time. Often the wizard is regarded as a very, very complex class because of the spellcasting trait. However, it's a relatively forgiving class for new players overall because wizards do have the ability to learn new spells during play and change the spells that they have prepared between adventuring days. This means that unlike many classes, you're not locked into the spells that you choose when you level up, but rather you get to pick the right spells for the right adventure and experiment with different magic and different types of abilities that you can have, because really, even though we're going to go into the wizard's class features, the wizard is really a class that is defined by their spells.
I also think the other important thing that makes the wizard so accessible is because of the vast array of spells that they have at their disposal, they don't have to tie themselves 100% to one playstyle. If you're playing the controller archetype, you're still probably bringing along a few blaster spells and a few support spells. The focus is important, but you're always going to be able to dabble with a little bit of every playstyle.
So let's dive into the core traits that every wizard has. First and foremost, wizards are an intelligence-based class. They're pretty much the only intelligence-based class in the player's handbook, and so this will want to be your highest stat.
For hit points, wizards get a D6 hit die. This is on the lower end of hit die possibilities, so you are going to be a little bit squishy as a wizard and probably going to want your friends who are wearing armor to protect you.
You get proficiency in intelligence and wisdom saving throws, which will help you avoid some nasty sort of mind control and fear effects, as well as sort of psychic effects, but not a lot of physical saving throws.
You also get to pick 2 of these skills. You have Arcana, History, Insight, Investigation, Medicine, Nature, and Religion. Really, I think it's your choice. For me, I would always pick Arcana, and for myself, probably Investigation would be my other choice.
No disagreement from me there. When it comes to weapons, wizards just get proficiency in simple weapons, and they get absolutely no armor proficiency. Although there are archetypes and subclasses that do allow wizards to become quite proficient weapon wielders and even boost their AC to the stratosphere, the baseline wizard is terrible at using weapons, and generally because they don't have a very good strength score, and you might have a decent dexterity, so using finesse weapons like daggers or ranged weapons like crossbows can work. There's also some creative ways around this with magic, and you have no armor proficiency innately. And if you try to wear armor, you cannot cast spells if you're not proficient in that armor. So fortunately, there's magic to solve that problem, but you're pretty squishy. You got the lowest hit die. Intelligence saving throws are not common, but they're nasty when they do come up. Wisdom saving throws are a little bit more common, but overall, you're just not...
You're here to cast spells and hide in the bushes.
Yeah.
So now let's dive into the class features. The most important feature for a wizard is going to be their first level feature for spellcasting. Wizards are full spellcasters. You're going to begin with 3 cantrips and 2 first level spell slots. And eventually, you're going to gain access to 9th level spells.
Now, intelligence is the spellcasting ability for your wizard, and so this means that when you calculate your spell saving throw DC, it's going to be 8 plus your proficiency bonus and your wisdom modifier. So this is when you cast an offensive spell like Fireball, your enemies have to beat this number in order to not take damage. On the other hand, your spell attack bonus is just your proficiency modifier plus your intelligence modifier, and you're going to use this when you're also attacking enemies with offensive-based spells that have attack rolls like the Firebolt or Scorching Ray spells.
The Wizard Features table, which is on page 166 of the Player's Handbook, shows how many spell slots and spells prepared you are going to have as a wizard at each level, and you're going to regain all of your spell slots on a long rest.
So as a wizard, you have a spellbook. This is a physical book, but you can choose the appearance and the way that it looks. This spellbook contains all the spells that you know. When you make a wizard at level 1, you get to pick 6 first level spells that go into this spellbook. And then every day, you sit down, you crack open your spellbook, and you're going to consult it, and you're going to choose which of the spells in your book you want to prepare that day. And so as a first level wizard, you have 6 spells in your spellbook. You get to pick 4 of them to prepare. And then any one of those 4 can be the ones that you use with your 2 spell slots. So it's kind of a narrowing process. You kind of have your big list of all the wizard spells that are out there that you can possibly learn. And then as you gain levels and go on adventures, you're going to find those spells and put them into your spell book. Then every day you're going to choose from the smorgasbord of those spells. And then ultimately you're going to use your spell slots to choose which ones you're going to cast. This generally means that as a wizard, you're going to have more spells in your spellbook than you can prepare, and you're going to have more spells prepared generally than you have spell slots. What does this mean? Wizards are the ultimate contingency class.
The analogy that I like to use is I have a recipe book at home. I never cook all the recipes in it, but I know all the recipes in it. I might only have the ingredients to actually make a handful of the recipes in this book, but I'm only going to cook 1 or 2 meals during the day. So really, even though I have the ingredients for multiple of them, and even though I know a bunch more, I'm only making 2 meals.
Yeah, and so you get to change your prepared spells after every long rest by consulting your spellbook. And once you get to 5th level during a short rest, you can actually change one of your prepared spells out as well.
One of the really cool things about wizards that no other spellcaster can really do is that when you're thinking about, oh, I want to find magic items or cool things in the loot that I'm rifling through in the dungeon, wizards really benefit from finding spell scrolls or other wizard spell books because they can copy the spells from those items into their spell book, thus allowing them to learn even more spells above and beyond what they would normally get as they level up.
Yeah, it's really cool because as a wizard, you do get 2 spells every time you gain a level, and you actually get an extra spell depending on your subclass as well. But in a weird way, you almost have the ability to kind of level up in the middle of the adventure by finding a new spell. Now, it always has to be a spell of a level that you can cast. There's no kind of getting around the rule. Like, if you're on an adventure and you happen to defeat a high-level wizard and their spellbook has 7th and 8th level spells in it, but you're only capable of having 3rd and 4th level spell slots, you can't put those spells into your spellbook and cast them yet. You're going to have to get more powerful and advanced before you can actually do anything with those. But you can fill out your spellbook with all their lower level spells if you want to.
Just remember that when you are copying spells into your spellbook, this does take time and it takes money. So it's going to cost you 50 gold per spell level to copy a spell into your book this way.
Beyond spellcasting, there's a couple other cool class features that you get as a wizard. The first is Ritual Adept, which this allows you to cast any ritual spells from your spellbook even if you don't have it prepared. This is really cool because this means that if you learn a spell like Find Familiar or Tensor's Floating Disc or Water Breathing or Telepathic Bond, you don't need to count those spells against your prepared spells. You just grab your spellbook and you just cast the ritual on the fly. So I always find that as a wizard, I really like to stock up on the ritual spells because these are just things that effects that you can apply to your party at basically no extra spell slot cost.
Also at 1st level, you're going to gain Arcane Recovery. Once per day, you can regain spell slots during a short rest. The spell slots regained can have a combined level equal to half your wizard level, rounding up. So a 5th level wizard can regain 3 levels worth of spell slots, for example.
Just note that with this feature, you can never regain spell slots of 6th level or higher. If you were a 20th level wizard, you could regain 2 5th level spell slots because 20 divided by 2 is 10. So that's 2 5th level spell slots, which is actually really good, but you're never going to be able to replenish your 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th level spell slots.
Moving on to 2nd level, you gain the ability Scholar, which allows you to gain expertise in Arcana, History, Investigation, Medicine, Nature, or Religion. Again, I'm probably choosing either Arcana or Investigation.
Now, wizards do gain ability score improvements at level 4, 8, 12, and 16th level, as well as an epic boon feat at level 19. We'll be talking about what feats we recommend shortly, but you really want to look at the ones that boost your intelligence.
And at 18th level, you're going to gain Spell Mastery. You get to choose 2 1st or 2nd level spells in your spellbook with a casting time of 1 action. You always have them prepared and can cast these at their lowest level at will. That means it does not require spell slot or any components. You just cast it.
And then at level 20, you get to choose 2 of your favorite 3rd level spells in your spellbook, and you always have those prepared, and you can cast each of these once per short rest without expending a spell slot.
Moving on to ability scores. No matter what type of wizard that you're playing, we're going to recommend the same array of ability scores that we're presenting here. I think that regardless, strength is going to be your dump stat. You're already a squishy wizard. I mean, you could play muscle wizard, but that's a very specific archetype. I think that strength is going to be our dump stat.
Yeah. Now, dexterity is a good stat to invest some points in as a tertiary stat. It's going to boost your AC and it's going to boost your initiative so that you're not completely feeble. So I recommend getting at least a 14 in here. Put make this your third highest stat.
Constitution is going to be a very valuable stat for wizards because they're going to be concentrating on spells a lot. This also is going to dictate your hit points. So again, you're squishy, but you don't want to be too squishy. So having a very high Constitution is going to really help you survive and concentrate on spells. We recommend putting a 15 into Constitution, and when you're choosing your background, this is a great place to look at putting your +1.
And intelligence is your primary stat as a wizard. It determines the power of your spells, and it should, in all cases, be your highest stat, and you should absolutely put your +2 bonus from your background into your intelligence. So we're going to 15 here. We're slamming that +2 in there. So we're going to start play with a 17 int.
When it comes to wisdom and charisma, this is more or less pick which one you want to be mildly better at and pick which one you want to dump. Most of the time, I will give my wizards a 10 in wisdom. This means that they can be mildly okay at things like perception, whereas charisma, you know, I'm a book reader. I'm a book nerd. I don't need to talk to people. I'll use my intelligence to talk to people, not my charisma. So dump charisma.
Yeah, this is a really good array if you are going with point buy. You could take some points out of con if you wanted to have a better wisdom or charisma, just for role-playing purposes, but it does make you a little bit squishier if you're going to do that. You got some really good choices for backgrounds, though, as a wizard. The criminal, merchant, and sage backgrounds all offer the choice of intelligence and constitution for your ability score boosts, and they're a great way to snag the feats alert, lucky, and magic initiate wizard.
I really want to know more about what a criminal wizard looks like. I think that that's just such a fun archetype.
Crimes against reality.
Crimes against reality. Why not? Yeah, it's fun. But the sage is obviously pretty typical. But all of these are going to be pretty cool.
Now, when it comes to species, this is a great place to just pick your favorite and get some really cool extra abilities on your wizard that are going to augment you in some subtle ways. I think the classic archetypes for wizards in many cases are elves and gnomes. There's the classic high elf wizard, I think is very strongly ingrained in fantasy, but also the gnomish illusionist is very cool.
I also, if we want to stretch that a little further, I like the idea of tieflings and Aasimar being wizards. I think that they are inherently magical creature. Same goes for Dragonborn. There's a lot of magic instilled in their blood, and therefore being a magical character just makes sense for them. But I do agree, elves and gnomes are pretty typical, but really all species have their wizards.
Indeed. And what's really cool is that there's no penalties for playing against type. If you want to play a dwarf wizard or an orc wizard, which are typically species that often don't have strong magical traditions, and spellcasters, particularly arcane spellcasters among them, can kind of be very unusual or very rare, there's no penalties for doing so. The orc features are still pretty oriented towards melee combat. The dwarf features actually are a great way to make you even to shore up the squishiness of the wizard, because the poison resistance and the extra hit points really actually do quite help a lot. So even if you are playing against type, it's never a bad thing. And of course, the human is ubiquitously always a good option as well. Getting an extra origin feat is super handy. Extra skill, super handy. There's no wrong choices here when it comes to what species you play with your wizard. One of the cool things, though, is that if you do choose an option like elves and tieflings, these species come with spells that they innately know, which you can cast using your spell slots too.
That's why I do like them inherently magical species, because sometimes they give you little bonus spells. And what's wrong with having more spells as a wizard? Speaking of more spells and other options, when we look at feats for the wizard, let's talk about each of the archetypes that we've represented and what feats you might pick for them. Starting with the blaster. For the blaster, probably some of the feats you're going to want to pay a lot of attention to is Elemental Adept, Spell Sniper, and Warcaster. With Elemental Adept, you get to choose a damage type and bypass resistance to that damage. So if you are playing a blaster, you might want to specify in a certain damage type, whether you're a Frost Mage or a Fire Mage or a Lightning Mage, and choose that damage type so that if you do run into creatures who are resistant to it, You get to get around that. Spell Sniper is going to give you an additional spell and kind of let you be the sharpshooter of spells. You get to increase your distance. You get to ignore certain cover.
Now, one feat that you'll notice that we've recommended for all the archetypes, the controller, the supporter, the blaster, all of them, is Warcaster. This is what we would consider to be the must-have feat for any wizard, because not only does it boost your intelligence, it gives you advantage on constitution saving throws to maintain concentration on your spells. This is a critical thing because your concentration on a spell is one of your most important resources, and having your concentration go down when you take damage or get thrown around is the worst ever. So Warcaster is... I don't want to say it's mandatory, but
it's the number one choice.
It's a mistake not to take it. For controllers, you might want to also consider telekinetic. This gives you a cool way of pushing people around with your bonus action. And resilient constitution is a great way to double down on your constitution saving throws and make you a bit tougher.
I think the reason why that works so well for a controller is because this means that if you place a damaging effect on the battlefield, you're not going to lose concentration on it because you've doubled up that assurance.
Yeah.
And you can telekinetically shove people back into that damaging area.
In most cases, the supporters might want the same feats as the controller, but you could also consider things like Keen Mind and Skill Expert if you just wanted to diversify your knowledge skills a little bit, or go into some other different territories there. Again, I think the supporter benefits a lot from taking telekinetic and resilient, but these are just some other suggestions that for going a different path.
Now, again, regardless of the archetype that you're playing, when we actually look at spells, especially cantrips, you're going to want to dabble in a little bit of all archetypes. You never want to go without a damage-dealing cantrip because it's going to be useful forever. And you're not going to need multiple damage-dealing. You might have one or two. But you will want to also look at debuffs and defensive options as well. When we do look at damage-dealing cantrips, Acid Splash, Firebolt, True Strike are probably the three to pay attention to. Personally, I'm a big fan of Firebolt. It's my go-to cantrip, but the other options here are great as well.
Acid Splash is awesome for having an AoE at will, and True Strike is kind of cool if you do want to be good at using weapons. My favorite debuff is Mind Sliver because this one actually lets you debuff an enemy's saving throws, and it's a great way to set up a much more powerful spell later in the combat encounter.
For debuffs, you can also look at something like Chill Touch, which stops a creature from being able to heal, or Ray of Frost or Shocking Grasp.
If you're defensive-oriented, one cantrip that you can concentrate on is Blade Ward, which will reduce attack rolls against you, effectively boosting your AC. And when it comes to utility, Mage Hand is just so good to have that telekinesis. I also love having Minor Illusion. Prestidigitation is a lot of fun if you can get it. Light and Mending can also be really good. This is where there's so many good wizard cantrips. It is an argument for getting Magic Initiate Wizard just so that you can have more of them.
Yeah. When we do start talking about the leveled spells, we do want to say that this is going to be the meatiest part of this episode, so we're probably not going to explain in detail what each spell does.
Wizards have the biggest spell list, and we're just going to say it right off the bat, like, don't be upset if we're omitting your favorite spell from our recommendations here, because there's so many spells, and especially if you want to play something like a Necromancer or a Summoner, you're still going to want to look really closely at spells of those schools instead of necessarily what we're recommending here.
We do think these recommendations are pretty good for all of the archetypes that we've represented here, but read over all the spells if you can and really pick and choose the ones that are going to work for you. These are just our recommendations, and you're going to want to read up on them as well because we won't be able to cover everything in this video. So for first level spells, we think that the universal choices are going to be spells like Mage Armor, Shield, Find Familiar, and Magic Missile. You may not need to take both Mage Armor and Shield. I definitely recommend having one, and in most cases, I actually might recommend having both.
I think that Mage Armor is the better one to start off with early, because it gives you a permanent, like, basically, it makes your AC 13 plus your Dex mod, and so that's going to be a bigger permanent change that lasts all day. But eventually, having both Mage Armor and Shield, I think most wizards are going to want both.
And
eventually.
you always want a pet, so Find Familiar is a go-to, and Magic Missile is one of the most reliable damage-dealing spells in the game, and by that I mean you literally don't roll to attack, it just hits. So if you're in a pinch, Magic Missile.
Find Familiar has so much utility. It's great to have a little friend. They can do some interesting things in combat as well. They can't fight, but they can kind of be there and they can act as a scout. And it's just wonderful for role-playing. When it comes to specific recommendations, I think some of the strongest options for blasters are Chromatic Orb. I love how it bounces around. Ice Knife is a great AoE that you don't have to be like close up like Burning Hands, and Witch Bolt is great for ongoing damage.
When it comes to the controllers, you should check out the spells Hideous Laughter and Sleep. Both can have devastating effects on the battlefield for knocking out one opponent or maybe multiple.
And for support characters, you might want to go with Fog Cloud and Grease to kind of create some environmental effects to control things a little bit as well.
For second level spells, universally, we really like Invisibility and Misty Step. There's nothing better than going around unseen or being able to relocate yourself on the battlefield as needed.
Invisibility is super cool when you upcast it because making your entire party invisible is great. If you're playing a blaster, your damage options here are going to look like Dragon's Breath, which is basically letting you Burning Hands every round. Flaming Sphere, which is going to conjure up a mobile ball of fire. And Scorching Ray for just when you want to shoot someone down.
And if you are a controller, there's no better second level spell to pick than Web. Web creates an area of effect that can stick all of your targets in place. And I love it when you can throw and toss enemies into the web and just let them get stuck there. Or in a last-ditch effort, you can finish it off by setting your web on fire with a firebolt.
Now, for the supporter, 2 Swiss Army Knife spells are Enlarge, Reduce, and Enhance Ability. These are amazing spells, especially if you're creative with Enlarge, Reduce, because you can use them on both creatures and objects, and you can do very creative things by buffing people up using these spells to help make ability checks, do more damage in combat, or even debuff an enemy by shrinking them down, or shrinking down a big object so that you can move it more easily.
As we move on to third level, some of the best spells in the game are third level spells. We recommend looking at Counterspell and Summon Fae. Counterspell is one of the only ways that you can actually undo another spellcaster trying to thwart you and your allies. So Counterspell can be game-changing when it comes up. Summon Fae, who doesn't like having extra bodies on the table to fight on your side, especially when you're summoning them from the fairy realms?
Blasters, take Fireball. It's awesome. It does great damage. It is way better than Lightning Bolt. Just because it's got that bigger range, that bigger AoE. It's way easier to use, and especially if you are going the Evoker subclass, you don't worry about your friends in it. The controllers, Hypnotic Pattern and Slow, end encounters single-handedly. Hypnotic Pattern is one of the strongest spells in the game for just incapacitating a large group of enemies, no questions asked.
And if you are looking for some support, Haste and Fly are excellent choices. Haste can really buff up some of the more attacky people on your team to get even more attacks in. And Fly, like Invisibility, you can cast it on yourself so that you're now a flying wizard, or you can upcast it to get the whole party flying.
Now, at 4th level, there's an amazing teleportation spell here called Dimension Door, which allows you and one person that you grab to bring with you to teleport up to 500 feet in any direction, even if you can't see the destination. It's an amazing spell. Take it. You will find ways to use it.
For the blaster, check out Ice Storm and Wall of Fire. Just both excellent ways to create an area of damaging effect on the table.
Now, for the controller, Banishment is just going to zot an enemy right out of the combat, or Ivard's Black Tentacles is like an upgraded web that does damage and crushes the people that are caught in it.
And what's greater than regular invisibility? Greater invisibility. Now you can actually do things like make you and your allies invisible and then continue to attack. Polymorph is also an excellent choice here for the supporters. First of all, Polymorph can be used if you're fighting a large monster and just want to turn your ally into a giant ape or a T-Rex, depending on what your DM is allowing. Or, if somebody's down to the wire with low hit points, also turning them into an ape or a T-Rex is a great way to save them from dying.
5th level spells really, if you thought the third level spells were great, the fifth level spells really take things to the next level. I think universally, you probably want to consider grabbing something like Telepathic Bond. I love this spell as a ritual with the wizard in the party because it kind of lets you justify all the table talk that normally happens, especially in those social encounters where like people are talking to each other about, should we say this? And the DM's like, are you guys plotting what you're going to say to the vampire lord while you're standing right in front of the vampire lord? So telepathic bond's a great way around that. I also love telekinesis and animate objects. These are great spells in combat, but also for shenanigans and utility.
When we look at the blasters, Cloud Kill and Cone of Cold are excellent 5th level choices.
And for the controller, Synaptic Static is kind of the psychic fireball that debuffs enemies, and Wall of Force is basically the strongest battlefield control spell in the game. It creates an impenetrable wall that you can use to trap enemies. One of my favorite tactics is take some dangerous enemies, do the globe version of the Wall of Force, and trap them in there with the Barbarian. Barbarian gets to have all their fun. I call it the playpen.
And if you're playing the supporter, Circle of Power is a very interesting option, as well as Seeming. I've had a lot of fun with Seeming, where you can just make you and your whole party look like other people. Great for infiltration if people aren't looking too closely. You can make yourself look like the castle guard and walk into the castle. Just don't get examined because they might catch you.
As we move into 6th level spells, this is when we start getting a lot of spells that really take the wizard's preparation to the next level, where you're going to start learning spells that you might want to cast in advance of your adventuring day to give you some sort of asset or protection that is going to be useful coming up. The poster child for this is the contingency spell. This spell lasts several days and allows you to set up a spell that triggers under a specific set of conditions later on. What's cool is that you can cast contingency like 2 days before you go to the dungeon, and it's still in effect for the dungeon, but then you still have your actual 6th level spell slot to use. If you're not sure what to do with your contingency, a good place to start is a contingency to cast invisibility on yourself if you're reduced to half hit points. This is a great emergency button, but you can get much more creative with contingency in other ways.
I used to have a contingency on my first wizard that was if they were reduced to like 1/3 their hit points, they immediately cast polymorph on themselves to turn into a T-Rex. It ended up pretty hilarious when I was in tiny dungeons and got hit, and then it turned into a giant T-Rex. But contingency is a really fun spell if you are into programming. You're basically magically creating an if-then statement for your wizard, which is cool. Tasha's Bubbling Cauldron is also a great universal pick here. It essentially just lets you create a bunch of standard potions that you can then use or give them out to your party.
Yeah, these are uncommon potions that last until you drink them or until you cast Tasha's Bubbling Cauldron again. You get to make a number equal to your int mod, and there's a lot of utility in the uncommon potions, even if you're just making healing potions to pass around to your party members.
And if you are a blaster, you should look at spells like Chain Lightning for your lightning damage, Disintegrate, or Sunbeam. Disintegrate is one of my favorites. Sunbeam is pretty cool for ongoing blasting, and Chain Lightning is just pretty fun to hit multiple targets with Chain Lightning.
Controllers are going to love Eyebite and Mass Suggestion for just plucking the puppet strings of everyone around you.
And for the supporters, Globe of Invulnerability and True Seeing are great pickups.
As we move into 7th level spells, I think Teleport and Plane Shift really redefine the scope of your adventures, and learning them and using them is great.
I think that blasters should check out Prismatic Spray, and controllers should check out Reverse Gravity.
And supporters might just want to make sure that your entire party has a cushy place to hang out between adventures and bring along Mordenkainen's magnificent mansion.
At 8th level, we get some really interesting wizard choices here. Universally, I recommend having Clone.
Have a backup of yourself.
Yeah, they always say, don't forget to back up your hard drive. In this case, your hard drive is your soul, and you're backing it up to your clone.
Well, I think it would be like your body, and then your mind is like on the cloud.
Yeah, your mind is on the cloud, head in the clouds. And when you die, your soul just goes into the clone and you can keep going.
Just remember, if you are at this point, if you make a clone of yourself, make sure your clone is kept in a safe place and have an extra copy of your spell book for your clone because you'll need it. Your gear won't come with you. I also like Mind Blank at this level as just a persistent buff to protect yourself from being spied on magically. At this level, a high level wizard has a lot of enemies that might want to spy on you with scrying, so...
Blasters are going to like Incinerary Cloud, and controllers are probably going to like something like Maze.
And a supporter might want to just control magic itself with an anti-magic field.
Now, at 9th level, the spell of all spells, universally, we very much recommend Wish here. Wish lets you cast any spell of 8th level or lower, it kind of just as an action. So if you have a spell that usually wouldn't be a single action or might take a long time to cast or have costly components or anything of that nature, you can just use Wish to be like, I'm going to do this spell. You can also use Wish for other shenanigans. This is going to be up to the DM interpretation, so be careful what you wish for. And also read the rules carefully for Wish. There is a chance that if you wish for something crazy, you might never be able to cast Wish again. So read the rules for Wish very carefully here.
For blasters, Meteor Swarm is the ultimate in destruction. Controllers will love Prismatic Wall and what it does for the battlefield, and supporters will like the upgraded True Polymorph or Shape Change spells to transform your allies into dragons.
Let's look at the wizard subclasses. Up first, we have the Abjurer. This is going to be an excellent choice for a defensive style play for a controller or a supporter.
The Abjurer allows you to make an arcane ward which absorbs hit point damage, and you can recharge the ward by casting your abjuration spells. Once you get to level 6, the projected ward allows you to use the ward not just to boost your own hit points, but to actually spend a reaction to project the ward out to an ally to absorb damage that comes to them.
At higher levels, Abjurers are always going to have counterspell and dispel magic prepared, and the spells aren't going to expend spell slots if they fail to stop a spell. And they also get to gain spell resistance, which is just great.
The Diviner, one of my favorite subclasses in the game. The Gift of Foresight gives them incredible abilities, controllers, and this is because of Portent, which lets the Diviner at the beginning of the adventure day roll 2 d20s, write those numbers down. Then later, you can replace any d20 test with one of these rolls. You have to do it before the roll is made, but you can affect a roll made by yourself, allies, or foes. My favorite use of this is if you roll 2 low numbers, like you roll like a 3 and a 4, you can cast a spell. For example, let's say...
Banishment?
Banishment on a Demon Lord. And instead of that Demon Lord rolling the saving throw, you just say, no, DM, they rolled a 3. And in most of the time, that means that they failed. Once you use one of those rolls, you can't use it again. And you do get a third die at level 14.
Diviners also get to regain spell slots when they cast divination spells. So this can actually create sort of a trickling effect of using divination magic in between your combats to actually regain lower spell slots that you can then use again in your next combat. And they gain dark vision, or they can also gain the ability to see invisibility.
If you don't care too much about seeing the future, though, you may just want to blow things up. The Evoker is a natural blaster, and their potent cantrips abilities allows them to deal half damage even when you miss or the target makes it save from one of your cantrips.
Also, they get to sculpt their spells, so area of effect spells don't harm their allies, meaning that evokers get to fireball all of their friends all the time without harming them.
They also get to add their int mod to their damage from their spells, and eventually overchannel their spells to just deal maximum damage.
The Illusionist is a very creative choice for controllers and supporters. They get an extended range on their illusion spells, and they can cast them without verbal components. And if they're using minor illusion, they can create a sound and an image at the same time.
They also get the ability to cast illusory versions of Summon Beast and Summon Fae without expending spell slots, just once per day. And the spectral versions have less hit points, but still kind of cool.
They can create an illusory self to escape attacks as a reaction, and they can use illusory reality, which allows them to make inanimate objects in their illusion spells partially real for 1 minute. Now that we've talked about these subclasses, let's take a look at what role-playing a wizard might look like. Of course, you can bring your wizard to life in any way that you choose, but there are some questions that you might want to consider answering to really define who your wizard is. And because all wizards learn magic from study, the question is, how did you learn magic? Did you attend a formal mage school? Were you an apprentice to a master wizard? Or did you teach yourself from a spell book you found in an old library?
One thing that can really give your wizard a ton of character and flavor is imagining how your wizard casts spells. What happens when you do so? Does your voice take on a deep resonance as you mutter the verbal components? Do runes hang in the air as you do the somatic gestures of every spell? Do your spells actually have like a subtle theme or flair to them that like maybe all of your spells involve stars or numbers, or you kind of have like that meme of like the swirling math all around your head when you cast a spell? This is a great way to give flavor to your wizard, no matter what kind of spells you're using. And so I really think thinking carefully about what happens when you cast a spell is so special and really, really cool. And every time you have this great opportunity, like, to describe how your wizard looks and what they sound like with every single spell. You don't just need to say, I cast fireball. You can be like, flame burns in my eyes and my voice sounds like a crackling flame as my body bursts into flame and I throw the fire. Like, it's way cooler to do that.
Think of the difference between when you watch think of the difference between watching Doctor Strange cast spells or Gandalf. Both had evocative ways in which they cast spells. I love the scene where Gandalf kind of threatens Frodo near the beginning and the room grows dark and he very subtle, but it's there. And then obviously Doctor Strange very much has the runes appearing in front of him at all times as he's doing his hand motions, which is just an iconic and classic way to imagine your spells. And on that note, you're also going to have a spell book, but what does your spell book look like? There's a lot of different interpretations of a spell book that actually can really define who your wizard is as a person. One type of wizard, and we all know this type, is going to have a leather-bound book with very finely crafted locks, and it's their little journal that they keep everything. And we all know the other type of wizard, who is a series of scrunched up notes and crinkled papers bound together with a rope. That might be your style of wizard. So there's a million ways to imagine your spellbook.
You can get really creative with this. I've had players over the years that was a dwarf wizard that their spellbook was metal jewelry that was braided into their beard. One wizard who their spellbook was tattooed on their body. And I played one once in Kelly's campaign where my wizard was an arcane gunslinger and my spellbook was a bandolier of bullets with every spell inscribed on the bullet that I loaded into a magical pistol that acted kind of as like my wand. So you can get really creative here and add a lot of flavor to your wizard. You also have your familiar too, which can be a very core companion for your wizard. I think it's really fun when the dungeon master role plays the familiar because you get to have this little bit of interplay between you and your familiar and what your relationship with your familiar is. Are they a helpful servant? Are they a pet? Are they your best friend? Defining that relationship is a lot of fun.
Also, wizards are often seeking knowledge. What knowledge or secrets are you seeking? Is there a specific spell you want or hope to learn? Are there magic items that you want to discover one day, such as maybe you want to learn the demiplane or wish spell, or perhaps find a staff of power?
Are you sometimes tempted to use dark magic or use magic in destructive and irresponsible ways? Or are you someone that views magic as something that needs to be used responsibly and protected?
What do you think of non-spellcasters? Some wizards might think that having magical powers is the next form of evolution. I'm very much thinking the X-Men.
Yeah.
There's either we should work with the normal folk, or no, we're the next form of it. Like, go one of those two directions, or maybe there's a third direction or a fourth. But what do you think of non-spellcasters?
And how did you take to the adventuring life? Are you more comfortable studying books indoors?
Wizards are often much smarter than their party members. Do you have trouble explaining arcane concepts to your companions? Do you go off spouting ancient lore that nobody understands? Or do you find that you have ways to make it simple for them? Dumb it down and make sure that they understand a triangle. It's a shape you can make with your fingers.
I'm going to explain this advanced concept using very small words, very slowly.
Your wizard has a series of finger puppets that are the other members of the party.
This is how magic works. This is why you don't stand where the fireball is.
Yeah. What are your vices, dark secrets, fears, or flaws? No matter what type of character you're playing, a perfect character is boring. Give them something that is a flaw. Give them something that maybe they don't want the rest of the party to know. Something that they're afraid of. Having these come into play during the campaign just makes for great role-playing and a more exciting character.
And of course, consider, how did you meet your adventuring companions? Do you have a special relationship with any of them? Perhaps you are siblings. Maybe another is, maybe you're friends with the sorcerer who flunked out of mage school but still found their powers somehow. Maybe you and the fighter are bosom buddies. Maybe someone saved another's life. There's all sorts of ways that you could have met before the adventure. And so establishing relationships with one or two other party members can really bring a lot of color and texture to your party.
So now you should be set up to start playing your wizard. We hope that this guide has been helpful for you. And if you have any concepts about your wizard that you're going to be making soon, we'd love to hear about it in the comments below.
The videos that we create on our channel are made possible thanks to the incredible generosity of our Patreon supporters. If you enjoy the work that we do here on YouTube and find our guides useful, please consider becoming a patron of the show. The links are down below.
And if you want to see us slinging some spells, you can check out our actual play in the Worlds of Drakenheim, which airs Tuesday evenings right here on YouTube. You can check out all the previous episodes right up over here.
And we've got all of our other class guides for the 2024 Player's Handbook. You can find them right up over here.
Please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and ring that bell so that you never miss an episode.
Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time
in the dungeon.